Hey guys, welcome back to Quadratic. Today you'll notice on the shelf we haven't got a quad, but we've actually got an array of goggles because I wanted to do something a little bit different and sort of review different types of goggles and why you would use different types of ones. So this is just going to be sort of a general overview of all the different types of goggles you can buy and the different specs and stuff, and hopefully you might learn something along the way and maybe inform your next decision on what type of FPV goggles and which one you want to get. So anyway, let's put them on the bench. You'll notice, of course, I haven't got every pair of goggle in the world, so I'll be doing some work on the computer, putting some images on the screen as well to go along with what I'm saying. So let's check them out. So here we have two of my pairs of goggles. We've got these Eachine VRD2 Pros, which are an upgrade of the old VRD2s, hence the name Pro, and also we've got the Aomway Commanders. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it, Aomway, who knows, Commanders V1s, and these are also very good. I really like these, just got these the other day actually, and so you'll be able to notice obviously there's a big difference between these, and there's also a lot of differences other than obviously the size and shape of them on the insides as well. So if you don't know, these are typically called box goggles because obviously they're quite big and they're pretty much box shaped as well, whereas these are just generally a lot more compact, pretty much very small form factor, not much bigger than sort of a ski mask that you'd be wearing, and not much heavier either. So these are generally just called compact goggles. So you'll be able to see, obviously, there is a big difference in them. And of course, with them being the size, one of the biggest differences is the screen size in these. So if we were to open this up and look inside, there would be a big LED display in here that is actually 5 inches. So pretty much the whole of this about here is actually the display, which obviously gives you a really big field of view. Now, field of view when it comes to goggles is different when it's compared to cameras. So the field of view in a camera is essentially how wide the camera angle is and how far out you can see in either side. So if you've got a wide field of view, you can see a lot of things. The field of view on the goggles is essentially how much fills up your screen. So if you've got a really large field of view, then pretty much the entirety of your screen is going to be filled, and by screen I mean what you can actually see with your eyes, so there's not going to be a lot of blank spaces. Think about it at the cinema. If you're sitting very close to the front of the cinema, it's going to have a high field of view and you're going to be able to see pretty much most of the screen in your eye line, whereas these compact goggles will have, instead of one big screen, obviously that's not going to fit, it's actually split into two. So we've got 2 different LCD displays in here, and you'd be able to see that poking through here. There's obviously one here and one here. However, because there's not a huge screen, even though they are a lot closer to your eyes, it is a smaller field of view on this. So the field of view on the Commanders, and pretty standard on compact goggles like this, is 32 degrees. You can expect up to about 35, I think, maybe 40 on most compact goggles. That seems to be the standard, whereas the field of view isn't actually listed on the product page for this VRD2 Pros, but as you would expect, it is a lot bigger because your face is here and you've got this huge 5-inch display right in front of it. So imagine sort of comparing this to sitting in the middle of a cinema theatre, and pretty much 80% of your vision is filled, whereas this would be more like sitting on the sofa at home watching the TV, and maybe about 20 or 30% of your vision is filled with the screen on this. So already there's quite a stark difference between these. When I first switched over to compact goggles, I really was surprised by how small the screen was in your field of view compared to using these box goggles. So bear that in mind if you want sort of a more immersive feel and a more cinema-like feel, then definitely you want the box goggles because they've got that much larger field of view, and so I do find that is a lot more immersive and a lot more nicer to fly with than a narrower field of view, but nevertheless these have got more advantages that make them better. Of course, if we've got a bigger screen in here, chances are we're going to have a better quality on it. So this is actually 800 by 480, which is a nice good quality. However, the Commanders, surprisingly, are actually 854 by 480, so they're a tiny little bit better quality on there as well. And of course, the cheaper you go, the worse the quality is going to be. So these are only sort of 500 by 300, and I think the Eachines are actually 720 by 540, so they're, well, sort of a different ratio than the other two, so not necessarily better. But of course, the more you spend, you'll be getting a better quality, but only up to a point, because if you didn't know, sort of the higher quality you go, the higher the latency will be when you're flying FPV. So that is sort of the time delay between your actual flight and what's happening and what's coming into your goggles. So that's the reason you don't see a lot of, say, 1080p goggles, because the latency in there is going to be higher. And obviously, if you go even higher than that, it's going to be pretty much impossible to fly, because the time delay between what you're inputting to the sticks and what your quad is doing compared to what's actually on your goggles is just going to be far too long. So you're not actually going to be able to fly FPV. So this quality obviously only scales to a point, and beyond that it's sort of unnecessary. So most even compact or box goggles are going to be about 480, maybe a few pushing up to 720 as well. Of course you can get 1080p ones, but then if you're going to be wanting to do sort of really fast racing, most people don't choose them because of that latency issue. So back in the 90s it used to be, like Jurassic Park says, bigger is more expensive. However, now it's come to smaller is more expensive, and there is definitely a big price difference between these. Generally you can pick up a pair of these, I think they're about $90 for these VR2 Pros, and anything from about $30 or $40 up to about $100 is what you would pay for standard box goggles. You can get sort of a lot more expensive box goggles that'll be a bigger display, better components and things, but I really don't see the point of spending more than sort of $100 or even that on box goggles. So these are about $90, I think. You can get a smaller version, which are the VR006. You'll see here, this is sort of a compact box goggle, really. It's not got as much features as you can see. On the side we've only got 4 menu buttons, or on the front we've got about 6 on this one. So it's less features, but it is obviously intended for someone on a budget, and fortunately it's quite small. It's sort of getting comparable to this size now, and I imagine in the future these are only going to get smaller and cheaper anyway. So this is about $40, and it is a very, very good beginner set, although I'll come on to a few more differences between those two in a minute. Whereas the Commanders, you're going to be paying about $300 for these, which is pretty expensive. I've got to admit, a lot of compact ones are about the $300 range, apart from these Eachine EV100s, which are pretty nice. They're compact, you'll see they're pretty much exactly the same size as the Commanders. And a little bit lighter actually as well, and these are on sale now for only about $100, I think. So this is obviously sort of the budget option of the FPV compact cameras, but there are of course drawbacks as well with this one, which I will come to in a moment. You'll notice on both of these there's actually a slot on the top, and that is for a memory card, so it's got an inbuilt DVR, which is a digital video recording. So of course you'll be able to record your flights as well on board on the camera. Now, due to the cheaper ones, they just don't have cheap enough DVR components to put in cheap goggles like this, so you are going to have to pay a bit more if you want DVR. So this is, like I said, $40, but it doesn't come with that DVR function, whereas the VR-D2 Pros do, and so did the VR-D2s, which are even cheaper than this, I believe, and they also came with DVR. But again, DVR, that's totally a personal preference. If you want to be recording yours and sort of uploading them, like many reviewers do, then you might think about getting a DVR. But if you're going to be flying a big quad and having a GoPro on there as well, there's not necessarily the need for a DVR as well, because obviously that's just going to be a lower quality camera and recording on there. The thing to note is that, of course, you might have noticed on all of these goggles there is the option for 2 antennas. You can get ones, usually the cheaper ones, that just have 1 antenna slot, but most of the ones nowadays come with 2, and this is because you might see in the titles of them, it is a diversity receiver. So what that means is basically you've got your 2 antennas, and so within the electronics of here, it basically takes in the signal from each of these and works out either by voltage or the amount of noise which signal is better, and then uses that antenna, and it's doing that constantly while you're flying, so it will switch between antennas. However, on the cheaper ones there's been quite a bit of controversy of people opening these up and discovering they're not real diversity, because obviously you're going to have to pay to have that electronics in there to choose between these, and so a lot of the cheaper ones, they tend to skimp out and say real diversity, and have obviously 2 antennas, but only one of these will actually work. The other one is either connected to ground or just not connected to anything at all. So do bear in mind and watch out for that if you're going to get the very cheap ones and expect to have a diversity module in here, because sometimes they don't. I'm not saying all of them, and I'm not saying this one doesn't, but there's been a lot of reports online of people opening them up and finding that they're not real, especially on these cheaper Chinese ones. But of course, you can be sure that the more expensive ones like the Aomoy Commanders and of course the Fat Shark, you can get diversity modules to go in, which is quite good. So there's always that to bear in mind with the cheaper ones. Now, taking a look on the side of these, you'll see they've got a little slide thing here on either side, and this is actually because I'm not sure why they're not the same. This is actually because in here you'll see there is a little screen as well, a little piece of glass between your face and the LCD screen, and if I move that, you'll be able to see sort of that moves forwards and backwards as well. And I've not actually taken the safe sort of screen thing that this comes off with, screen protector. I've not taken that off yet, and that is of course so you can change sort of the focal point in these goggles. So if they're sort of the focal point is here and you can't see, you can change those, push that forward, and then the focal point will be here instead, so on the screen. And fortunately inside most of the, well, inside pretty much all of the compact goggles as well, we've got that same thing down here. So this is obviously better because it'll suit each eye, so you can change the focal point for each eye individually, which is good because most people's eyesight isn't exactly the same strength between each eye. And even better on these is that you can also swap these out for thicker lenses. So if you have to wear glasses, obviously that's not going to work very well. So it's essentially like having a pair of contact lenses in here, so that'll change again the focal point for you if you've got problems with that. And you could buy these online, and especially with the Fat Sharks, you can fit them in quite easily. With ones like these, you'll probably have to take apart the whole set of goggles as well. And we've even got that option on, of course, the cheap ones as well. So even for $100, they're still in there. Although, obviously, it's not going to be as good. And the lenses probably aren't as good as you'll pay for the more expensive ones in there. So bear that in mind if you're going to be having... well, if you do have to wear glasses, you don't sort of wear your own contact lenses or anything, then glasses most of the time aren't going to fit. There are some big boxes, sort of this size and a bit bigger, that do allow the fitting of glasses because people have managed to do it, but it's not amazingly comfy. So if you've got glasses and you don't want to wear contact lenses, then I'd suggest swapping out these for a pair of thicker or possibly thinner lenses as well. And you'll notice also on the bottom of these Aomoy Commanders, we have got the option to put HDMI in. So if we wanted instead of to receive it from here, we received it from an external module, or just wanted to put in HDMI and watch something on here, then we've got that option to put the HDMI in. And there's also the option for audio in there as well. Also, you'll note, comparing the amount of buttons, there's a couple more on here. This has actually got a fan, you'll notice, at the front, so this is to stop it steaming up. So if it's hot or really cold outside, sometimes the lenses steam up, so you can whack on that fan and stop that. However, it doesn't usually come with box goggle fans. They don't usually come with one, so bear that in mind. If you sort of a heavy breather, or you sort of get a really hot face for some reason, these might steam up a little bit. And so looking at the other ones, we've got the DVR function on here and on here as well, and doing that and the mode button, we can do the menus on here, whereas these have got more separate buttons. But you'll also notice we've got a scan button on here. We don't have auto scan on the Commanders for some reason, so you do have to search through that frequency channels, whereas you can just auto scan it on the VRD2s, and they're also not auto scannable on the e-sheens either. And you'll see we've got the menu buttons on here, and then this little sort of knob to do the menu as well. And if we go back to the DVR function, you'll notice we don't actually have it on the eSheen EV100s. However, there is a new version of the eSheens coming out, the eSheen EV200s, which actually are a 720p screen, or set of screens rather, so they're 720p resolution, and they've got a built-in DVR as well. However, I think those are going to retail at about $250, possibly even up to, say, $280. So that's going to be on par with these Commanders and some of the Fat Sharks and other goggles as well, which is sort of a little bit hard to guess, I guess, because whether they're going to be good or not. Eachine has a lot of problems with quality control, so maybe 100 of these will get sent out and be perfect, and for every 100, 5 or 10 will not be very good. There'll be issues with them because their quality control just isn't that good yet. So you'll see a lot of people complaining online about sort of Eachine goggles and also Eachine products as well, because they happen to have gotten the faulty ones, whereas a lot of the products are usually quite good. So anyway, the Eachine EV200Ds are going to be coming out soon. Hopefully I'm going to get a pair of those to review soon and compare them to sort of the Commanders and the Fat Sharks and the other ones. And you'll notice I actually don't have a pair of Fat Sharks, and I'm going to get so much hate for this, but personally I don't actually like Fat Sharks. They've sort of been in the market obviously a long time, and they've sort of dominated and been the only real choice, and up until recently, up until sort of last year, the only real choice for compact goggles like this. But then of course the Commanders, these came out and sort of blew that away, and these are just as comparable as the Fat Sharks. And you know, there's sort of other ones coming out too. If the Eachine EV200s are good, then they'll probably sort of be comparable to Fat Sharks as well, whereas these aren't really, because there's no DVR function, and there's a few other dissimilarities. But yeah, personal preference, don't like Fat Shark that much. They're a little bit too expensive, I think, although saying that, of course, the Commanders are $300, but the Fat Sharks seem to have a lot more high-end products compared to the low ones. But of course, a lot of people are happy with Fat Sharks, and I'm not saying they're bad products, I'm just saying personally I don't like them that much. There hasn't been that much innovation in their products. They seem to release a lot of sort of the same and very similar goggles without much change. But of course, this is going to get a lot of hate from the Fat Shark fanboys, I imagine. So that's just been a sort of brief overview of the different types of goggles and different brands. I'll include an image or so now with different ones, of course, that I don't have because I don't have them all. So sort of suggestions for you to go and check out if you want that. So bear in mind sort of those things when you're looking for a pair of goggles. Box goggles tend to be a lot cheaper, so if you're on a budget, go ahead get a pair of them. Just make sure whether it's got DVR or not, because not all of them do. Whereas the compact, obviously a lot smaller form factor, a lot nicer to wear, especially if you've got the budget to go out and splash on these. They are a bit better to use and sort of carry around, so you don't have the big box goggles getting in the way of everything. In terms of the cheaper ones, if you're going to buy these Eachines, I would probably recommend waiting for the Eachine EV200Ds because most likely they'll be cheaper than the price that is on screen, which is actually $280 when they first come out. So possibly wait for those, wait for the reviews, because it could be better, and if you're getting a pair of compacts like this, it might be better just to wait and have that upgrade available with, of course, the DVR and the higher quality screen as well. So I think they're due to come out in hopefully by the end of the first quarter of this year, so sort of by the end of March. I can't imagine them being much longer than that. So if you've got the patience to wait, then of course you wait out for the reviews of those. Hopefully I'll get a pair of those and be able to review it on here as well. If you want sort of the leading secondary competition to Fat Sharks, Aomway are probably one of the best, I'd say, at the moment. I think there's plans to release a new version of this, so there's nothing solid at the moment. So obviously don't pin your hopes up on that. Just go ahead and get a pair of these if you would like. The links for all of these goggles will be in the description, and some other ones that I'd recommend as well. But these are probably my favourite. I've used Fat Sharks before, and while Fat Sharks do have quite a bit more sort of ability to change stuff, you can pop out modules and things, I do like the Aomways just because they're quite simple and they're quite nice as well, and I always like to support the little guy as well, which sounds cheesy, but Fat Shark are quite a big company with a lot of products, and Aomway just sort of came out of nowhere and produced these really great set of goggles, so I'd like to support them as well, and support them hopefully producing some more sets as well. There's quite a few different variations. These are an Eachine brand. You can get sort of Fairy Bee branded, or even sort of Fat Shark box goggles if you want. I'll leave a link to a few of different types of these in varying price ranges in the description as well. But of course, if you want sort of the ultra budget option, you can always get something like the VR006 because these are really the cheapest sort of things you can get, and you can get into FPV from about $30 or $40, which for a set of goggles is really good, and that is literally a tenth of the price of the Commanders. So if you just want to try it out, go ahead and get something cheap. I would suggest you don't need to dive in straight into the deep end and get the more expensive ones and the more compact form factors, and don't feel like sort of you're going to get laughed at if you go out wearing these big box goggles. You just got to ignore everyone, and especially people in the FPV community won't mind at all what sort of kit you're running, because everyone I've seen so far has been really friendly. So anyway, guys, thanks for that. That was just a very quick recap, like I said, and quick overview of the different types of goggles. Hope you found something useful, and like I said, links are in the description for all these goggles and more, so go and check them out. Peace out, guys. Thanks for watching.